And I hope we're coming loud and clear right now to your Zoom. Some house rules and reminders too to please change your display name with your name and organization of affiliation for better identification. And also, please stay muted and keep your video off for a more pleasant experience for everyone. I will be your MC this afternoon. My name is Cha Almeida from the Resilient.PH and Arise Philippines. We are now at the Building Resilience Index Forum, Women's Role in Creating a Resilient Building Environment. This forum is in celebration of the National Women's Month as a collaborative initiative of the International Finance Corporation, the Government of Netherlands, Australian Government, the Rockefeller Foundation, Arise Philippines, Resilient.PH, SM Cares, and Win DRR. We'd like to thank the Government of Netherlands and Australian Government and the Rockefeller Foundation for the relentless support in the BRI implementation. We'd also like to extend our gratitude for the participation of the following: the Board of Directors and members, work theme and priority area leads and network members of the Arise Philippines, leaders from SM Cares, WinDRR and their partners, distinguished guests and front runners from Resilient.PH, NEO, DPWH, Infinity Imperial Solar Solutions, Kurit Architects, Philippine Institute of Interior Designers, SM Prime Holdings Inc., National Resilience Council, Aboitiz Foundation, Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation, Build Change, Habitat for Humanity, Asian Institute of Management, Stephen Zwillig Graduate School of Development Management, National University, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, and the International Finance Corporation's partners. Thank you for gracing this forum this afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you in this event. For 35 years now, we have joined our fellow Filipinos in observance of the National Women's Month. We are now at unprecedented times since it commenced in the Proclamation number 227, series of 1988. Other than securing the role of women in social, cultural, economic, and political development, it is a must to do the same on efforts toward climate and disaster resiliency. The IFC, or International Finance Corporation, would like to take this opportune time to highlight the role that Filipino women play in ensuring resilience, particularly in the built ecosystem, which is one of the main thrusts of IFC's innovation called the Building Resilience Index app. The collaborating organizations for this BRI forum have a common denominator of a thrust in upholding gender equality and inclusiveness in DRR and resilience. IFC believes that our women leaders are equally able to promote the platform and help increase its awareness and use among local developers because of the significant and influential role they play in their chosen field. IFC partnered with Arise Philippines since BRI's launching in the country. It is one of the earliest collaborators and supporters of the IFC in advocating the adoption of BRI among its relevant members. This forum is one among the many events that will continue the collaboration of Arise Network and IFC. IFC likewise engaged the Resilient PH to assist in scaling up, adapting resilient practices and transparency in the built environment through BRI. Resilient.PH, or the Resilient Philippines, is a multi-platform social enterprise advancing resilience programming in communities and institutions in the Philippines. SM Cares, a division of SM Foundation, is the corporate social responsibility arm of SM Supermoms. One of its advocacies includes programs for women. SM Cares also closely supports WIN DRR, a professional network supporting women in disaster risk reduction. One of its latest activities was the conduct of the Women's International Network for Disaster Risk Reduction Awards in 2022. The overall goal of WinDRR is to empower women to attain leadership and enhance their role in decision making in disaster risk reduction in Asia Pacific. In 2022, a webinar on women's role in making communities resilient was conducted as a collaborative activity of SM Supermalls, SM Cares, WinDRR, and Arise Philippines, commemorating International Women's Month. IFC and Resilient.PH would like to leverage that momentum of institutionalizing BRI in the country by collaborating with these notable organizations to celebrate National Women's Month 2023 through the BRI Forum, emphasizing the women's role in creating a resilient built environment. Through this platform, we aim to elevate and highlight the transformational role of women in achieving resilience in the built environment and ensure inclusivity. The BRI Forum will be an hour and a half activity with presentations on resilient building ecosystem, women and climate, private sector's initiatives on women resilience, and a panel discussion will follow. Now, that was just the intro. To formally start our program, we have the opening remarks to be delivered by none other than retired Vice Admiral Alex P. Pama, co-chair of RISE Philippines. He is a retired Vice Admiral of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and served the 32nd Flag Officer in Command, Philippine Navy. And right now, he's the co-chair of the Board of Directors of RISE Philippines, a private sector alliance for DRR in support to the UNDRR advocacy for the attainment of the goals of the Sendai Framework for Action, and a consultant to the National Resilience Council, as well as a member of the board of the Oscar M. Lopez Center. He is also an adjunct professor at the Asian Institute of Management's Executive Master in Disaster Risk and Crisis Management, and a lecturer at the Ateneo de Manila University's Master in Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience. Formerly, he was the Executive Director of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, and concurrently the Administrator of the Office of Civil Defense. DND, were among his mandates, was to integrate, supervise, coordinate, and harmonize government and multi-sectoral efforts in DRR and management system and resilience. Friends, let's welcome USEC Alex Pama.
Thank you very much, Sha. I think that introduction is longer than my remarks. But thank you very much for the very generous introduction, and a pleasant afternoon to everyone. 48 years ago, let me set aside the introductions, as I'm sure the proper introductions for all the participants would be done later. So in the interest of time, I go straight to the point. So 48 years ago, the United Nations declared as the International Women's Month, March. In the Philippines, we dedicate the month of March as the National Women's Month to emphasize the role of women in the social, cultural, economic, and political life of the country. Today, we are conducting this forum to highlight this effort in a particular and a unique way. You may be wondering why I, a man, speaking before you to open this significant event. Worry not, I declare myself as an honorary woman. Setting aside my personality as the co-chair of RISE Philippines, one of the partner organizers of today's forum, I have always been a believer and advocate for inclusivity and equal rights and opportunities for women. Even when I was still in the government service, and even the military service, I have witnessed the significant and essential role that women played in practically most, if not all, aspects of the public service. In fact, when I was captain of a ship, I could sleep better when the officer of the deck, officer in the watch, is a lady officer. Napakadetalyado. I'm certain, therefore, that it's only proper and fitting that I live up to the belief and stand here before you to speak and commence a very worthy undertaking for a very important sector of our society. Having said that, I would like to proceed and state at the outset that today, the Philippines is recognized by ASEAN and the UN Women as one of the leading countries in Southeast Asia and maybe in the world in advancing the issues of gender equality and pushing for women's empowerment. It started with the enactment of the Magna Carta for Women in 2009, our country's foundational and legal basis in promoting and protecting the rights of women. And consequently, and as a case in point, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Program, or the NDRRP and Plan, 2020 to 2030, recognizes and promotes gender mainstreaming as one of the pillars in the implementation of the plan. The NDRRMP 2020-2030 commits to addressing the gender inequalities in the previous paradigm in the implementation of the disaster plan and pursue the promotion of equity in the participation and decision-making roles of women and men in disaster risk reduction and management. As part of the realization of this plan, the NDRRMC reports its gender and development plan through the GMMS, or the Gender Mainstreaming Monitoring System, under the Philippine Commission on Women. The agency has also appointed gender focal points at both the national and regional levels, and I believe all the way down to the municipal levels. Our progress is undeniable, but it is also a fact that there is still a lot more to be done. I have been an advocate and implementer of this new paradigm where women takes a more active, significant, and meaningful roles in DRRM and resilience. In relation to today's event, it is a fact that women are at the core of resilience and transformation in the built environment. At Arise Philippines, as the local network of private sector alliances for disaster resilient societies led by the UNDRR, we are guided by the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, or SFDRR, in committing to forge collaborations among our network to ensure that women are given significant and at times critical roles in the formulation and implementation of programs and activities in DRR and resilience. The SFDRR recognizes women as key stakeholders to, and I quote, effectively manage disaster risk and designing, resourcing, and implementing gender-sensitive disaster risk reduction policies, plans, and programs. Our forum today focuses on women's role in creating a resilient built environment. The built environment plays a determining role in the lives we live today and the future that we aspire to create and have. However, gender disparities still exist in most of the stages of the built environment life cycle. In spite of these gaps, however, it is more important for us to see the opportunities for growth and achieve the rightful status of women in this environment. The implementation of the International Finance Corporation's Building Resilience Index, or BRI, as platform for the attainment of this noble goal should be one of the avenues or platforms to support women leaders and implementers in the built environment. These are some of the reasons that make this afternoon's event a crucial platform to drive the thrust of National Women's Month into reality towards a more resilient Philippines. And at this point, on behalf of Rise Philippines co-chair, Mr. Hans TC, and the rest of our board, I would like to extend my gratitude to the International Finance Corporation, the Government of Netherlands, the Australian Government, the Rockefeller Foundation, Resilient.PH, SMA Cares, and WinDRR for making this collaborative forum happen together with Arise Philippines. Let us continue to move as one in pushing the envelope for concrete actions, creating the Philippines as the beacon, not bacon, for DRR and resilience, where women thrive and undertake a significant and impactful role in the priority area of resilient infrastructures and communities. And at this point, I also would like to acknowledge and thank the panel members, the moderators, and the organizers of this forum. As we say in the Navy, bravo Zulu, or congratulations, job well done. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Yusik Yusek Pama for setting the tone for this afternoon's event and for supporting women's rights and embedding inclusivity in your work at Arise Philippines. Now, what exactly is Building Resilience Index or BRI? It is at the heart of this forum, and you will get to have a better understanding of BRI from our next speaker. Ms. Pearl Mars is a technical specialist for the Building Resilience Index program of the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group. She also manages the climate program of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation Philippines. She is trained in the field of geography and public administration from the University of Philippines, Diliman, and finished her Master of Science in Environment Science and Policy from the Central European University in Vienna, Austria. Her work experience includes working with the UP DREAM or Disaster Risk Exposure for Assessment and Mitigation, Project NOAA on different capacities. She also engages with other international non-government organizations like UNDP, Humanity and Inclusion, and Christian Aid, and local governments in the Philippines. Let's all welcome Ms. Pearl Mars.
I'll just shift the podium a little bit to the audience online. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for coming. Yusek Alex, Yusek Kathy, Chair Liz, Miss Gurley, Miss G, thank you very much for joining. Miss Palin also is joining us online, and then Fran as one of who will be presenting our work also in gender and climate. So for now, allow me to first introduce building. Some of you might have heard of it already, but just to give an overview of what we are doing in resilience and what we are doing also in BRI to try to advocate also women empowerment and capacity building. JF. So yeah. So introducing the Building Resilience Index. So this is one of the innovations of IFC. This is focusing on resilience. So the work is focused more on climate change adaptation. So before I start, allow me to introduce first the organization. So IFC is a member of the World Bank Group. IFC is one of the five organizations comprising the World Bank Group. We are focusing on the private sector development. Within IFC, there is a department called Climate Business, which we are part of. So our goal is to introduce climate smart solutions in the market. So one of these innovations is the Building Resilience Index. Next slide. Okay. So currently, just a bit of this is a rich slide, so please bear with me. So we're currently we are living in one of the major crossroads in human history. So we are seeing the massive growth of greenhouse gases emissions. There are a lot of efforts to reduce it. So in this regard, we are also the World Bank Group and IFC is helping to try to reduce the greenhouse gases emission with innovations on the green building initiative. So our work on Edge Green Buildings program is focusing more on that one. We are also seeing more and more disasters happening. So especially in the Philippines, this is very apparent. We are seeing more disasters happen more frequently and severely each time. So in the last um, in the last 30 years, so we have seen that disasters is playing a very huge role in our life. So this has a lot of repercussions on economic activities that we have. So we are also seeing rapid urbanization. So in 2020, um, the Philippines have already 50%, more than 50% of the Philippine population is already living in urban areas. So meaning that there's a lot of stress in the urban environment. So there's a need to focus the work in terms of how we can try to make the cities more resilient against natural disasters, since a lot of people are living already in the urban areas. So we're also living in the digital revolution era. So putting all of this together, we see that there's a lot of stress in the built environment. So there's a need to find a solution how we can try to find or how we can try to make the cities, the buildings and cities more resilient. Next slide. So with that one, we want to focus our work on the built environment. So because we know that buildings play a very big role in climate change. So earlier I've mentioned about the Green Buildings program of IFC. The focus is how can we make buildings run more efficiently. But we know with climate change, disasters happen. Um, and whenever these disasters happen, we need to reconstruct and rebuild. And whenever we try to rebuild and reconstruct, that work produces more greenhouse gases emissions. So that's basically the start of a very vicious cycle in the built environment. So with IFC, we're trying to find a solution how we can try to solve that. So with that, we have introduced in the market the Building Resilience Index. So the focus is more on climate change adaptation. Next slide. So we all know this one. We know that disasters are costly and assets are mostly uninsured. So um, basically, in the past 40 years or 30 years, we have seen that um, the losses in the disaster areas have increased in the past years. So we're seeing the green part focuses on the losses, those on the insured losses, and then the orange part is uninsured losses. So you'll see that there's a very big um um difference there. And that is very crucial because we know that though those uninsured losses are usually um being bore out of packet of individuals or businesses. And if you look at on the micro level, those have huge impact in terms of the lives of the people, especially on women and especially in women in the poor sector of society. Next slide. So basically putting all those together, we have introduced the Building Resilience Index. So basically, the Building Resilience Index is part of the larger work of the World Bank Group on climate change adaptation and resilience. So the first two focus is to basically improve adaptation financing and improve the capacities of countries to deal with climate change. The third part is to develop a new rating system that aims to incentivize investments in adaptation and resilience and improve tracking. So we're using this four-part strategy to introduce building resilience in the market. So we are working directly with financial institutions to develop products um to incentivize resilient construction and buildings. We are working directly with um developers to try to directly invest in them. And the third part is to work closely with the government sector, with the public sector, to try to come up with um, incentives coming from the public sector to mainstream the uptake of resilient buildings. And of course, the fourth one is the introduction of the Building Resilience Index app. So, so on to the meat of the presentation. So that's a long background, but essentially, Building Resilience Index. This is a web-based hazard mapping and resilience assessment framework. So it has three main components. We first identify the risk based on the location of the building. So what we are looking at are the four major hazard categories that the building experiences. So among these four major hazard categories, we have further identified 15 major hazard types. So once we have identified the risk applicable on the location of the property, we try to manage that. So within the platform, you can find some solutions that would improve the resilience of the project. So we look at the physical integrity and operational continuity of the building. And the third part is to develop uh, a unifying language that all the stakeholders and the real estate sector can understand. So the rating system is something that the banking sector, the real estate sector, the insurance agencies, and the public could understand. So basically, you can see here we are introducing the new rating system that we have. So we were going to be doing more exposures on doing introducing this new rating system in the market. Next slide. So there are a lot of ways that we can benefit from building resilience index. So in the construction sector, I think um, the benefit is that there is now a way to assess and improve resilience to site specific natural hazard, disclose the risk, rating to financiers, insurers, and users, and they can really differentiate their brand as a developer of resilient buildings. For the government sector, I think the biggest benefit is that there is now a way to try to reduce the repetitive cost of post-disaster recovery and reconstruction. We can also create an enabling environment for mainstream and resilient buildings. And I think ultimately the goal is that the people, women, tenants have now the peace of mind that they're choosing to live and work in safer buildings. So the first part is identification of hazards. So we have partnered with USDF box on this one. So we're using Hazard Hunter Philippines to look into the applicable hazards based on the location of the project. Next slide is the management of risk. So we look at what are the possible solutions to improve the resilience of buildings. Next slide. And we are using the weakest link principle, meaning that all hazard category will be assessed, and then the overall rating will be assessed based on the weakest link principle, meaning that it won't be computed mathematically. So because the idea is that we know that nature at some point would exploit where we are weakest. That's why we want the developers to focus where they are weakest so they can try to improve on that measure. So this is how the disclosure system looks like. Next slide. So our work on building resilience index have started in 2021. So the initial target is to get a pledge from the real estate sector to pledge their properties to assess the resilience of their projects. So initial target was 1 million square m, but as of December 2022, we now have more than 1 million square meter of space pledged in the Philippines. And this is possible because of the support coming from the women's sector, from these real estate developers. So we are thankful from the leadership of Emma from Imperial Homes, Miss G from NEO, Miss Liza from SM Prime Holding. So these are all possible because of their support to really push the market to improve the resilience of their projects. We have also launched the Resilience Hackathon, wherein we encourage more participation from women. So this was launched in 2022, and out of that 5 finalists, around more than 40%, around 40% of the finalists are composed of women participants. Next slide. So we're also doing some measures internally to try to involve more women as much as possible in the market. So as on the trained verifiers, we have now trained total of 35 participants. 8 of that are women. In terms of the activities that we are doing from 2021 to 2022, slowly increasing the number of women participation. But then again, if you look closely on the total number of participants, that is still not even half. So there's still a big work that we need to do so that more women would be able to really work on trying to make our buildings and our cities more resilient. Next slide. So we are also introducing the Building Resilience Index and the Designing for Greater Efficiency course. So we are also encouraging more women to participate, to join the Green Building course. We're introducing this in the Philippines. So these are designed for students. The goal is that more and more students who will become future professionals will or more women focused. Next slide. And I think I'd stop at that point. I just want to acknowledge our donors who make all our innovations free to use for everyone. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Pearls, for that comprehensive presentation so that our audience will have a better appreciation of the BRI and how it will benefit all the stakeholders of the built environment. As stated by the UN Women, the climate crisis is not gender neutral. It is a fact, not only in the Philippines, but across the globe, that women and girls experience the greatest impacts of climate change. Ms. Fran Dining will walk us deeper on the matters surrounding women and climate. Franziska, or Fran Dininger, currently leads the Gender and Climate Work Program in the Gender and Economic Inclusion Group of the International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group. This work is centered on addressing global knowledge gaps on the gender climate nexus and in identifying solutions to advance gender equality in private sector climate work. She previously supported the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program, the Clean Cooking Fund, and the Infrastructure Global Practice of the World Bank. Fran has also held different positions at the Boston Consulting Group, or BCG, in global risk management, as well as the financial services industry. Fran holds a double master's degree from Sciences Po in Paris and the London School of Economics in Economic Policy and Political Economy, as well as a bachelor's in science in economics and social entrepreneurship from Northeastern University. She is a German national currently living in London, United Kingdom. That's why I know Miss Fran is joining us via Zoom, straight from London. Hello there, Fran. You may now start with your presentation.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I hope everyone can hear me okay, online as well as in the room. So really great to be here today, and excellent also to hear Pearl's presentation of the Building Resilience Index. I think it's a fantastic initiative. So I will just essentially be speaking for the next 15 minutes on this topic of gender and climate. And what I'm hoping to do today is to really show you why it's so critical to be looking at climate change and gender as two sides of the same coin, as it's really integrated development priorities. So I'll be kind of going through the following materials today. So first, I want to contextualize this conversation in the Filipino context. We've heard from Pearl and the previous speakers already about kind of the risk that climate change poses globally, but also more specifically in the Philippines. So I'll be expanding a little bit on that. Then the big why. So really understanding the key reasons why gender and climate need to be considered in an integrated way. And then finally, I will be making the case specifically in the building sector. So why is this dimension of gender and climate so critical in the urban context, in the buildings development sector? So let's get started. So as most of you will probably know already on this call, and as was already introduced by the previous speakers, climate change is already a major risk to the Filipino economy. So a lot of conversations in climate change are still speaking about it as a future event. But in fact, climate change is already here. It's already having a significant impact on the local economy. And we know that both the combination of extreme weather events and slow onset trends like rising sea levels, increased temperatures, also changes in precipitation, these effects have tremendous effects on economic activity. They tend to damage infrastructure, and they cause deep social disruption. So there's a strong social dimension here where climate impacts the most vulnerable and the most disadvantaged groups to a much more significant extent. Now, to put this a bit into numbers, according to the World Bank Group's climate change development report for the Philippines, which was launched last year in 2022. According to those estimates, the effects of climate change could result in a reduction of the Filipino GDP by almost 8% by 2030 and almost 14% by 2040. So to put this in a graph, we really see on the left axis the impacts of climate change on the local economy, so on GDP. And we see that there's a downward trend and that there's a large range of potential damage in terms of the local economy. Now, very important to consider, GDP is one measure, but this is of course closely tied to the human development, to social cohesion, to social development, to socioeconomic outcomes. So GDP is one measure for assessing kind of globally the impact of climate change and what it can do in terms of its damage. Now, that's a lot of bad news, but there is also some good news. According to that same report, the country-level climate change diagnostic, comprehensive action can really reduce these impacts significantly. So we really see that comprehensive action, both in terms of public sector, both private sector and civil society, can really make a difference in terms of the level of impact that climate change has on both the economy and on societies as well. And this is on two key fronts. On mitigation, which is essentially CO2 emissions reductions, there is a big argument for investing in renewable energy sources and energy efficiency to really ensure that as the Philippines continues to grow, continues to develop, continues to urbanize, that our GHG emissions are not going up at the same time. Now, it's very important to acknowledge that currently the Philippines generates very small amounts of GHG in the overall global picture. That's very, very, very important to acknowledge. The other really key aspect, aside from mitigation, is around adaptation and resilience building. So this is really tapping into this idea that climate change is already having an impact. There's only so much prevention that is possible. It is now also about having an honest reflection on how we can adapt systems, including buildings, including local infrastructure, to be able to absorb climate shocks and risks more effectively. So with less damage, with less cost, in a more resilient way. And that is ultimately these two dimensions, mitigation and adaptation and resilience building. This is where gender inclusive approaches are really, really critical. So that's a bit of the context. But why is a gender inclusive approach in climate change particularly important? There are really three key reasons that I would like to highlight. The first one is that women and other disadvantaged groups are disproportionately impacted by climate change. So this is the notion that has been put forth by the UN that was just referenced, this idea that climate change is not an equalizer. It is not something that affects different groups equally. And we see this in the Philippines as well. And here are just a few indicative statistics that really point out this disproportionate relationship. Women are 50% or were 50% more likely to die during Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. So this is a trend that we see across multiple disasters, that women are more likely to die in those types of disasters. Women also tend to prioritize food for men or for the boys in the household when there are increased food shortages. So they're likely to suffer from malnutrition or less food intake, for example, following a disaster or as a result of reduced productivity in crops. Now, when it comes to kind of the productive sector, when we think about jobs, 25% of women are working as agricultural workers, and they're at a greater disadvantage from climate change because they face increased household burdens, they face reduced mobility, they have more constraints in accessing climate smart technologies. So those are just some indicative statistics to show this unequal impact on women, but also other vulnerable groups. Now, moving beyond just the risk perspective, there's also this idea that women and other groups are less likely to gain from new climate-related opportunities. So taking buildings, for example, as a perfect example, as the Philippines invests in green and more resilient buildings, women are less likely to benefit from those projects. And there's multiple reasons for this. First, starting with labor force participation. So women make up 49% of the labor, or 49% of women are employed in the labor markets versus almost 80% for men. And this figure has stayed rather stagnant. So although the Philippines is actually quite a high performer in terms of gender equality, so it's ranked in 17th position on the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Index, but labor force participation rate has stayed particularly stagnant. So it's a low performer in terms of the other East Asian countries. More importantly, for the climate crisis, we see that women are particularly absent in the construction sector, making up just 3% of the workforce. Employment in manufacturing, only 40% of the workforce, and in mining and quarrying, only 7% of the workforce. Now, why have I highlighted those three sectors? Is because those critical sectors are, in fact, the things that are most relevant in the future in terms of upskilling, reskilling, climate-proofing sectors. These will have the most, essentially, movement when we think of the green transition. So it's very important to see that these gender gaps will impact the just transition or the inclusiveness of, let's say, climate resilient construction or more climate adapted manufacturing. So it's really, these gaps are really critical. We also see a gap in the private sector in terms of women's representation in leadership. So women are also absent from leadership. And of course, this is not just in the private sector, this is also in the public sector, designing NDCs, designing national climate programs. These are being designed currently without fully featuring women's perspective. Now, just some global statistics to kind of add to this image. These are no longer disaggregated to the Filipino context, but they show you a bit of also the fact that women are missing from the science. They're missing from the climate science. They make up 30% of the IPCC authors. There's only 122 authors or climate scientists listed in this most influential climate scientists list. And they report less green talent. So essentially, LinkedIn did a survey to understand what the sex distribution is in terms of people's ability to use their skills in green sectors. And it was 100 men versus 62 women that reported they would feel comfortable using green skills. So now on the third point, and perhaps kind of the most exciting and also the most important to highlight, is that women are powerful change makers in climate action and can also improve mitigation and adaptation. And before I even get into some of the evidence to show this, it's simply the fact that climate change, as mentioned by our previous speakers, it's presenting a crossroads for us as a humanity, right? And how can we design effective solutions and address this problem with only 50% of the population involved? I mean, this is really the crux of the argument. How can we really design new systems, new ways of working that don't work for half the population? So that's really the argument here. And what we see is that when women are present in decision-making, there are really sizable impacts on business climate action. So for example, according to one study, this study was looking at 159 of the most carbon emitting companies. And they found that in companies that had more gender diversity on their boards, they performed significantly better in 8 out of 9 climate action indicators. They were 2 times as likely to develop decarbonization strategies, and they were 25% more likely to have medium and long-term GHG reduction targets. So this is pretty significant. We also see that companies who improved gender diversity over a 5-year period, they were 60% more likely to reduce the intensity of energy consumption. They're almost 40% more likely to reduce GHG emissions and 46% more likely to reduce water use. A really striking figure, a 1% increase in the share of female managers leads to a 0.5% reduction in CO2 emissions. This was a study of 2,000 listed companies, and this relationship was reflected across these 2,000 companies. So imagine if every company across the Philippines committed to increasing the share of female management by just 1%, the impact on GHG emissions would be quite sizable, according to the findings of this study. We also see this in the financial sector, which we know the financial sector plays a massive role in innovating and financing, in investment in terms of climate smart programs and policies. So banks with more than 37% female directors had 10% lower lending volumes to companies with high pollution rates. So what all of these numbers tell you is that when women are able to make decisions, they're able to be heard, they're given a voice in climate action, companies perform significantly better in terms of their climate ambitions and also their climate impacts. Now, in the last just 2 or 3 minutes, and I know I only have 15 minutes to present, so I will just wrap up in the next few minutes, but the building sector in particular represents a really high impact space for this gender and climate nexus. And first, on the mitigation side, making buildings greener and more resilient is really a high impact climate action because of the following areas. So 54% of total power consumption comes from buildings in the Philippines, so over half. So addressing the efficiency, the energy efficiency of the building sector is really a very high impact area. 80% of growth in energy demand by 2040 will be driven by building construction. So it's also really a huge driver in terms of energy demand moving forward. And this is in particular because of growing urbanization and more of the population moving to urban centers. There's a huge investment opportunity here as well, because only 3% of newly constructed floor space in 2019 was considered green. So there's a lot of room for action here. On the adaptation side, we know that the Philippines is third among countries most vulnerable to climate change. And this is in particular because of natural hazards of storms. So I think there was an analysis done by the UN that estimates roughly 22 tropical cyclones hit Philippines each year, of which 6 to 7 cause economic damage. So that's a tremendous amount of exposure that the Philippines faces. It is most affected by extreme weather events in the last 2 decades. That emphasizes this point again. But also 65% of the population will reside in cities by 2050. This means that cities are critical sites to ensure that your population is resilient and can adapt effectively to climate change. So this is really an area that is critical from an adaptation perspective. Now, bringing in the gender perspective here, we also see that cities, buildings, and also local disaster preparedness intersects critically with gender. Now, on one dimension, it's because, again, women are more impacted by climate change. So I've referenced again this statistic that women were more likely to die and perish during the Typhoon Haiyan. They only make up 3% of the construction workforce, so they're less able to actually participate in new green projects in the building sector. And they can also experience additional constraints in urban settings. So this is on the risk side, the risk being that women will be more impacted, but less able to take advantage of new opportunities. Now, not on the risk side, but moving to the role that women can play, and this is really the important stuff, is women can help build community level resilience. And we've seen this time again in multiple contexts, including in the Philippines. So when women are involved in disaster preparedness and resilience building, those approaches are much more effective because ultimately they require community level buy-in. Women have also played a really significant role in terms of disaster risk mitigation and also post-disaster recovery. So, for example, multiple studies in Bangladesh have shown that when women are involved in post-disaster recovery, those approaches are more timely and the more effective, and they reach more people. So again, we have a critical connection between resilience building and more gender inclusion. Now, last but not least, women's leadership, as I mentioned earlier, is associated with innovation, problem solving, two key areas that are critical for climate action, and their leadership is associated with more robust climate action and outcomes. So again, when we're looking at this high impact sector, it is really, really critical to have women's voices present, whether it's in the construction, in the design, in procurement, in community resilience building. All of these avenues are ways to integrate women's perspectives, ultimately to result in a more effective sector and a more climate resilient sector. So I'll wrap up there. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. This is essentially just a snapshot of some of the work that we're trying to do at IFC on the gender and climate nexus. And I am wishing you a very fruitful and productive panel. It sounds like you guys will have a very great discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. That presentation surely captured the intersectional impacts of gender and climate change and highlighting gender inclusive approaches in the dimension of both climate change adaptation, mitigation, and DRR. And those statistics are also proof that we need to put more support for women change makers in climate actions, especially for mitigation and adaptation in the building sector down to the community level. We saw that there are some questions from our online audience, but we will cater to those after the panel discussion. For the next 20 minutes, we're going to watch and listen to a panel discussion diving into the important topic of women's role in creating a resilient built ecosystem. For our audience, please jot down your questions for our speakers. And for our online audience, kindly use the chat button for your questions for our open forum later. We will address those after the panel discussion. To steer the conversation in the panel discussion, we have Yusek Maria Catalina E. Cabral as our moderator. She is currently the Department of Public Works and Highways Undersecretary for Planning and Public-Private Partnership. She is a licensed civil engineer holding 3 master's degrees and 2 doctorate degrees in the field of business management, economics, and public administration. At present, she is finishing another doctorate degree on urban and regional planning at the University of the Philippines. Yusek Kathy made history when she became the first female rank and file employee who reached the level of undersecretary in the hierarchy of officials in the engineering and construction arm of the government. She is a registered ASEAN and APEC engineer and has been conferred as an honorary fellow by the ASEAN Federation of Engineering Organization. In 2017 to 2018, she became the national president and first female highest leader of the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers. In addition to her accolades, is being awarded as one of the 5 outstanding Filipino awardees for government and public service awarded by the JCI Senate Philippines for the year 2022. Let's all welcome on our platform, Yusek Kathy Cabral. Now, let me introduce to you our esteemed panelists as they take their seats one by one here on our platform. I will start with Ms. G. Garcia. Ms. G. Garcia started her career in administration, design, and construction with more than 15 years of practice in vertical and horizontal development. Her experience in value engineering, due diligence, and compliance made her cogent. After her stints in construction, G decided to change her profession and move to property management. Currently, She's the managing director for property management of NEO Property Management Inc. Trained in project management, she helped lead NEO in receiving international and local recognitions, including the most significant five-star Verde certifications for all seven buildings of the NEO portfolio. A green building and sustainability advocate, a pollution control officer, and a certified Verde practitioner, G's green building management is entirely outside the box. She delights into practical strategies to make sustainable operations inexpensive and less challenging. As a woman in the male dominated industry that is real estate, she is an advocate for women empowerment, putting forward that women can contribute to more to advancing sustainable development. Prioritizing care for the health and well being of the building occupants, she also led NEO in the achievement of the Well Health Safety Rating, which was also granted to the entire portfolio for its operational interventions to protect building users from disease and other health issues verified by the International Well Building Institute. It was also under her direction and initiative that NEO was able to pilot projects for both the Philippine Green Building Council's Advancing Net Zero Philippines and Health and Well-being Rating Scheme. G continues to seek ambitious achievements with IFC's EDGE Zero Carbon Certification and Building Resilience Index program to contribute to the industry. Let's welcome Ms. G. Garcia. Good afternoon, Ms. G. On to our next panelist. Let's go to Ms. Gurley Lopez. Ms. Gurley is an experienced development and corporate financial inclusion specialist with strong technical knowledge gained through 20 years of professional engagements dealing with highly diversified credit markets to include banks, microfinance institutions, wholesale fund providers, government, regulatory agencies, and advocacy groups. Her passion is creating access for low income and vulnerable communities to financial services. As Build Changes Program Manager for the Philippines, Gurley provides leadership, management, technical expertise, and general direction for all projects in the country. Let's all welcome Ms. Gurley Lopez. Next is Ms. Liza Silerio. She is currently the Vice President for Corporate Compliance Group for SM Prime Holdings, Inc., with 20 years of experience in mall operations. She is also the Program Director for SM Environment and Sustainability and is a global board member of Arise Private Sector Alliance for Disaster Resilient Societies as a global board member. Former Secretariat of the Arise Philippines, she's also by the United Nations for Disaster Risk Reduction. UNDRR is the focal point of the United Nations system for DRR and the custodian of the Sendai framework, supporting countries and societies in its implementation, monitoring, and review of progress. Let's welcome Ms. Liza Silerio. Thank you for gracing today's forum, ma'am. And joining us online is Ms. Marilyn Estrellado from Habitat for Humanity. Ms. Marilyn is a registered social worker who has been working in the housing sector for the past 2 decades. She is currently Habitat for Humanity Philippines Programs and Operations Director. She leads the development and implementation of the integrated housing and community development projects in partnership with various stakeholders like local and national government agencies, civil society organizations, community associations, and international funding entities. Previously, as project manager, she spearheaded the DILG's resettlement governance program and worked with different key shelter agencies to provide capacity building and transition funding to receiving LGUs in NCR, Regions 3 and 4A, which they can use for basic social services to tend to the needs of resettled families. She pioneered the inter-LGU cooperative arrangements between sending and receiving LGUs. She also led the crafting of key relocation and resettlement policies of the DILG. She has also worked for various non-government organizations and universities as community organizer. Miss Marilyn graduated with a bachelor's degree in social work from Bicol University in Legazpi City and is currently pursuing a master's degree in community development from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Hello, Miss Marilyn.
Afternoon,
Yeah.
everyone.
So that completes our panelists and our moderator in front of us. Take it away, ladies.
Good afternoon to everyone. Of course, first I'd like to thank the organizer of this forum. Very important. Happy Women's Month pala po sa inyong lahat. Of course, IFC is leading the pack. Government of Netherlands, Australian government, the Rockefeller Foundation, our partners in private sector, Arise, Philippines, SM Care, and other organizations, representatives here. Thank you very much, and we're very honored to be leading a lot of endeavors and activities, especially in the built environment. I'm DPWH Undersecretary Cathy Cabral, in charge, and by the way, the chair of the DPWH Gender and Development Focal System. And I have listened very seriously in the presentations earlier, particularly in the Building Resilience Index. And, very surprisingly, kami yata sa gobyerno ang nahuli. Everybody, I think, in the private sector has already been well advised and informed of the availability of that application. And I was like, inano ko kagad, in-online ko, sabi ko, bakit kami wala, no? So, maybe later on I can request IFC to probably we can arrange some opportunity for government agencies, especially Public Works and DSUD, who is in charge of the housing, to be brief and apprised of what this building resilience index is all about and how can we check the resiliency of our building. That said, I'm supposed to moderate this conversation, so bear with us, us four ladies, and our friend online. Um, we are all in the field of not only building, but making sure that we are working closely together with the community and the private sector to make the built environment in the country climate and disaster resilient. So what are the activities of your organization in relation to making sure that our built environment, especially in urban centers where more than 50% of the population resides, no? And I was trying to appreciate ano bang efforts ng government to complement what you people in the private sector are doing. So let's start na. Ano po bang mga activities natin that would complement or that would promote resiliency and making sure the built environment.
Well, thank you for that question. Um, Basically, I'm in the industry we're in. More than 50% are male. I mean, it's a male-dominated industry. So, right, based on the presentation of Karen earlier, we're like 3% in the industry, and I think that 3% can actually help on a corporate level and as a personal, advocacy to coordinate and collaborate with different international and local um, foundations or companies. Like, for example, when we did our pilot for NEO, we collaborated with IFC. Before they even launched it here in the Philippines, we piloted our project already and we helped them out on how it can adapt the procedures here in the Philippines, because that is an international platform. So it's kind of difficult for them to, to just apply it here for us. So what we did, we helped them out on how it can be able to manage and accommodate the current situation here in the Philippines. So right now they were able to launch it, and up to this time we're still helping them in the rating system, how it can be improved, and how it can be adapted to the local government's policies and procedures. I think that is something that we can actually do as an advocacy, as women in the industry of real estate.
What's our role in as women, to make sure that we push this endeavor?
Because we have a keen eye for details. So I think having those platforms being reviewed by women, we can give a lot of information and inputs on those kinds of platforms that are now being used here in the Philippines as we go on.
Actually, totoo yan, ma'am. In fact, 50% sabi kanina nung datos, no? More likely women to die after calamities.
Yeah.
'Di ba? Because alam niyo kung bakit? Kami yung naiiwan. 'Di ba? Naiiwan to take
everything.
care of the children and make sure that, before we leave and go to evacuation centers, kami po yung tumitingin para masiguro na yung iiwanan naming kabahayan, may babalikan pa kami.
Yeah,
So
that's
medyo
true.
yun ang we are the last man standing. The woman is the last man
That's true, that's
standing.
true. It's true. Imagine
Oo.
transferring that to the building. I mean, the
Correct.
building sector.
Correct.
It would really help. It's always the women who's last standing in that particular building. Delicado.
Ma'am Girlie.
Well, Build Change is really into disaster resilient houses and schools. Yun po yung aming DNA talaga. Yun ang aming layunin. In the Philippines,
Sell nyo na talaga yun.
oo, doon po kami pinanganak, basically. With Build Change working in the Philippines, we started after Typhoon Yolanda. So most of our projects are really into post-disaster.
Everyone
Kaya ho,
remembers
marami ho kaming-
Yolanda.
Opo,
Diba?
marami ho kaming naging katrabaho po na nandito po sa ating lugar ngayon. But we've realized moving forward that this should not happen, that we should just be reacting every time a disaster strikes. That's why we went into the preventive approach. Most recently, we are now working with both government and the private sector to promote building back better before the next disaster strikes. In the Philippines, we're proud to say that we're working with the local communities. We've started this huge project with a couple of the microfinance institutions. Why them? Because they are those who caters to the vulnerable sector, yung nasa baba po, the low and middle income, which in most cases are going to suffer when the next disaster strikes. What we do right now are two things: making sure that the new construction design would be resilient. At the same time po, one thing that we need to look at, similar to what happened to Turkey, we need to retrofit and strengthen houses, the existing houses, because these are the kinds of houses wherein our current families are staying. And when the next disaster strikes, most of the casualties, wag naman po sana, are expected to come from there. And that's where Build Change right now is working, trying to influence the people that it's not true that we cannot do anything. Awareness, the people should want a resilient house. Second is that we're working with financial institutions so that they would have access to financing. Because even if they would want to, if they don't have the money, they would not build. And then thirdly is that with my colleagues here on the construction sector, the construction professionals, technology should be made available to everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of economic status. So that's most of the projects that Build Change is currently working on.
That is so true, no? Of course, everyone remembers Yolanda. And, while we were happily sleeping in Metro Manila, and, suddenly there was no communication. Naalala niyo ba yung Yolanda? No, that was 2015. Hindi ako nagkakamali. And Region 8 was totally, and with government, it took us 3 days to reach ground zero. And, if I remember it right, Secretary Singson, who was then leading the Department of Public Works and Highways, we were trying to build, temporary houses Wow, ang hirap pala. Hindi pala ganun kadali because even if you have the funds and contractors then were volunteering to build, there were no materials available. So ma'am, speaking of retrofitting, opo, speaking of retrofitting and strengthening and making sure that, tayo dito sa Metro Manila, we're more knowledgeable, educated, we have access to information. Pero ma'am, yung nasa probinsya, alam naman po natin, they are more they are struggling and challenging. So how is your organization Arise and of course SM, who is really, I've been hearing a lot of advocacies by no less than your chair, Mr. C, in making sure that not only the people in urban centers like Metro Manila have access, to technology, have access to, financing, to make sure that they know ano ba yung retrofitting. 'Di ba? Paano mo natin magagawa yun? To make sure that people in the provinces and yun saka dulu-duluhan
Yeah.
ay matutulungan natin magkaroon ng edukasyon.
Okay, so thank you very much, Yusek Kathy. First of all, let me just give you a perspective of our company in the women empowerment. So SM Prime's workforce comprised 56% women in the
Wow.
SM Prime Holdings, and 47 of these are senior management
Wow, lipat na lang
positions.
tayo doon.
Ganun po kataas ang
Marami
women
palang
empowerment.
opportunity doon.
To add to that, our design group, 70% are women, 30% are male. And our engineering group, 50% are women, so 50-50. So this is where we stand when we say women empowerment in SM. Now, we've been following up on the Sendai framework, but going back to the question, the Build Back Better is not something that we really adhere to. We want to say build
Build
better first.
Correct.
So nandun kami sa build better first. We are proactive, and that is the direction of our chairman, Mr. Hansi. In fact, lahat ng malls namin have this water catchment basins. We have them in all our malls, wherein during the flooding, we can hold on to the flood waters and will be released after the typhoon in MOA with the Department of Public Works and Highways, and also in partnership with the local government. So as the need arises in any locations where we are located, we put that technology, we innovate, and we put all of these disaster resilient features in our malls. So the disaster resiliency is a core strategy in our business because this is good for investors. So it is not just because we want to do a CSR. We want to be responsible. And as our chairman will always say, I want to sleep well at night during floodings, during typhoons, because I know that I have prepared my buildings, my establishments. So there are a lot of innovations and technology that were applied in our malls, from the environmental and the recycling of water to the energy efficiency buildings to renewable energies. These are the programs that have reached across or SM nationwide. So it's not just in the urban areas. Our priorities are in the areas where there's a big need for it. So with build change here, she was saying about the build change in different areas. Uh, the presence of build change in our company is we ask them to audit the Typhoon Yolanda housing, 1,000 units in very, very far flung areas. We built that for the victims of Typhoon Yolanda. So these were audited. So it's not just being proactive, but we also would like to have ourselves audited, no, a third party audit group that can tell us where is the resiliency, how do we protect these settlers in very far areas. So uh, with history, of course, in the design, we always say we can build within the code, but in many of our structures, we have built above the code.
Tama po yan, ma'am, no? Tama po yan. And so also, I remember, Yolanda, I was the president of the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers back in 2017. So there, and we completed, housing, well, PIC was supporting and built, housing in a community na nakapag-contribute kami, no? But it's really very challenging. If I recall, even Region 8, pumasok yung maraming donor eh.
Yes.
'Di ba? And government was building houses. Private sector were building houses as well. And professional organization like PIC were also building houses. Ang tanong nun, ang challenge nun was, where can we build? Asan ang land? Oh, 'di ba? And identifying the land at that time, it's very difficult because nawala lahat ng titulo. You cannot just build because you don't know if that area is privately owned. Okay? And as I've said, making sure that people occupy those houses, syempre yung gumawa ba yung World Bank o yung mga international donor organization, iba po yung standards and specs nila. Po yung gobyerno, naghanap lang kami ng para lang makatulong. Nag-umpisa pa kami yata sa tent noon. So, Habitat for Humanity is really, very strong and also in making sure that we have houses. Ma'am, ano ba ang standard, ng private sector when you build houses or you help build community and LGU settlements? Again, it's very difficult and the challenge because I sat in the board of, what do you call this? The Housing Regulatory Board. And it's very difficult, to find the land. So, ma'am, kayo po sa Habitat for Humanity, how do you face and what are the challenges, when you want to build, but again, LGU, private sector, government, paano po yung coordination na nangyari?
Good afternoon, Yusek Cabral and my co-panelists. No, you were right, Yusek. No, it was very difficult. And I before Habitat in 2018, I was with two government agencies with programs on the resettlement of informal settler families from the danger areas. No, so there were a lot of lessons on the negative impact of distant relocation and inadequate housing. And basically, these were the lessons that I brought in when I joined Habitat in 2018. And also, I led a technical unit in reviewing our program services and processes so that these lessons will be integrated in the Habitat programs in 2018. That's why we developed the Resilient, Inclusive, and Sustainable and Empowered Communities program. And the Rice Commits program is a highly integrated and inclusive program anchored on people-centered approach. And this is highly participatory and heavy on partnership development. Kasi as you mentioned before, even in site identification, it is already a common problem. For example, the DOTR resettlement program for the rehabilitation of our railway system, for example, it was budgeted in 2016, but currently only a very minimal number of families have been relocated because one of the constraints really is the site, no, identifying affordable land that are also near to basic social services and would avoid social displacement. So through Habitat Philippines, with our 35 years of experience, also in providing decent housing to the lowest income families, what we do actually is to really mobilize the committees that we organize, that they themselves do not just relying on government to identify land, but they themselves identify the most suitable land that work in those projects can be built on. So most of the time you take that's also one of the amazing things.
Yeah.
No? The people can really identify land, and what we only do is to facilitate the coordination with government and the landowner so that we will be able to acquire land. So apart from the site identification, sabi ko nga, with the negative impact of distant relocation, pag sa site identification pa lang, nagkamali na tayo. Ang daming inaanak talaga na social issues, no? So that is very clear sa first step pa lang. So what we do is really to do a thorough due diligence to ensure that these areas that are identified are safe, secure. They are also accessible to basic social services, transportation, and basic utilities, as well as to livelihood and employment. And also one of the innovations that I brought in Habitat Philippines to the Rice Commits program is really to do to really ensure that the people are part of the decision-making process. So we do community participatory planning in designing of our housing and settlements design. So we really also ensure that women and vulnerable sectors of our communities are able to participate in those planning and designing processes so that their concerns will be integrated in our housing and settlement design. Currently, when we do housing proposals, we ensure that apart from the houses, community infrastructures are integrated, and we also do community development, 3-year capacity development, so that even if you phase out after 3 to 5 years, the community will be able to maintain and ensure they are self-reliant when we do phase out in the projects. Apart from that, we also try, through partnerships with the private sector and government, that green innovative technologies are also integrated in housing designs so that families can also enjoy and contribute towards climate change adaptation, like solarization, inclusion of linear and green open spaces, as well as the adoption of technologies like the green ants, eco hub technology as alternative construction material. We have piloted this in Leyte. We also are integrating water catchment facilities and other innovative features, green features, so that our per community, we are able to really contribute to disaster resilience and climate change adaptation.
Thank you, ma'am. And you spoke of a lot of very good concepts and ideas. Do you know that the National Building Code is currently being revised it's in Congress, because that National Building Code was enacted, I think, in the 1960s. So it's outdated already, not considering, the current climate change, even the recent laws, for example, the fire code, among others. So I hope that the private sector really puts in, give in a lot of inputs in crafting the updated National Building Code that will be called now the Philippine Building Act. O kaya lang medyo maraming discussions pang nangyayari. So and ma'am, you would want to say about
It's
the
the,
Philippine Building Code.
revision of the latest IRR on the fire code. We were very active. No, I think we contributed a lot that benefited other companies. I have here my colleague, Attorney Pearl Turley, who led, the collaboration with the Bureau of Fire and DILG in the revision, because there are really elements of the fire code which will not apply anymore, and which is really which the private sector cannot really meet. So I think it's the private sector who should be able to sit down and be
Right.
part of the
Right.
consultation
Right.
when you revise the building code, because we have a lot to share.
Right.
Because in the fire code, from the parking system to fire protection system, from all the other compartmentation of our engineering, electromechanical, there were lots of improvements that we were able to give as input. So I hope that the private sector will be invited.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes. And it's now being deliberated in both houses. But of course, it's very challenging because there's a lot of issues
Yes.
right now in making sure, that the revised or updated building code will reflect, current situations and changes.
Yes.
And there are a lot, not only disaster resiliency, but as you correctly pointed out, build better first.
Yeah.
Oo. Concept of building it right the first time.
Yes, first time.
Mas mahagastos ho mag-repair. Kaya sa ayusin natin yung ating mga struktura the first time, no?
Yes.
Ma'am, have you had any challenges, for example, as a woman professional, in pushing for your advocacy, particularly in disaster resilience, in pushing women to be more proactive sa not only in your organization but also in you know the built environment, because again, as I've said, here in Metro Manila it's okay because we are, I see many women here more educated, but in the province it's quite difficult. They really, are uh more they rely more in, sa kanilang mga community, nandun sila.
What I do personally,
What do you advise?
I really do advise mentorship. I mean, we've already made it there. I mean, we are here, we're sitting down, we're saying all our advocacy, etc. But it's time for us to really go down the line
Exactly.
and talk to them. I mean, travel, go to those areas wherein there are,
Can you give a specific, for
like for
example,
example,
meron ba kayo nakausap na
yeah, me
na-empower niyo?
personally, when I dive, I scuba dive. So when I go to Batangas, I make sure to it that I go to certain areas in Anilao or in Mabine, and then I talk to the children there. And then when I talk to them, I invite them about built environment, green building, how they can take care of waste management, how can they throw or manage those basura, those trash, plastics in the water, something like that. These are small things that we can actually do as an advocacy. Just to add on the issue we're in on the local government, the new RRI, I was asked about it, and I told them when I was asked, I told them that it's really important for us to really focus on the existing buildings because we have a lot. Right now, majority of the buildings that are being constructed, being designed and constructed are already there. Wherein they are already adopting new rules, new platforms, international platforms, LEED, PhilGBC's green building. And there's a lot of platforms that are now being followed because every developers right now, whether it's residential or commercial, they're already focusing on green buildings. But the challenge really is that how we can be able to retrofit those buildings that are existing in the areas in Manila where it's very vulnerable, where it needs to be a resilient building. These are the items that really needs to be put in the new building code. Yeah, it has to be addressed. There should be a mandatory, that's what I was telling, that there should be a mandatory guide for them on how to retrofit it at part to the latest standard. Because imagine an old building that is already 25 years old and 30 years old. That is not a resilient building, right? And that those are the buildings that will have challenges if something strikes. Like for example, the big one. If it strikes, it's not the new building that will have problem because it's already there. I mean, it's already green. We've designed it, we constructed it in such a way that is already at par or beyond the guidelines. But those buildings in the areas near the lake, the reclamation areas in Rizal, these are the buildings that are really vulnerable when it comes to resilience. And I think the government, including the building code, the new ones, should focus more on this one. There should be a mandated retrofit for this one. And there should be a financial institution that has to adopt and contribute to that one.
Yes, yes. Again, babalikan ko lang, no, in one Senate hearing, kasi talagang ako yung kumukuha ng input sa kanila eh. In one Senate hearing, a senator, we were talking about, the earthquake yan, di ba? Yung preparedness, the big one. Do you know that if that big one happened, and it's right, there was a JICA study that Metro Manila is right for the big one. So if you happen to live in a house located on top, so hopefully not on top of a fault, please make sure you retrofit strongly your house, ha? Oo. But having said that, ma'am, ang tanong sa amin, okay yung mga private sector eh, mga buildings, sabi nyo nga, they have the money to retrofit. And the new buildings are built according to the latest standards, international seismic standards. Eh paano ma'am yung mga informal settlers, ma'am Girlie? Paano naman namin gagastusan? Kami po ba, paano natin tutulungan? Kasi yan ang pinaka-challenge, yung mga informal settlers. Anong i-retrofit pambayad nila? Sinong gagastos?
Kaya ako nangangailangan tayo ng solusyon sa mga ganyang katanungan.
Di ba? Parang nagpaparinig na
Oh.
ako. Sinong gagastos?
First and foremost, siguro, yung pong sa informal settlers, okay, the issue about informal settlers is that we have a stand. They need to be in places where they should be.
Diba?
Okay, yun po. For their sake and for everybody's socio-economic state. So they need to be relocated somewhere. It should be government who should be looking after it, right? But on the other hand, besides the informal settlers, there are also a lot of unengineered houses, those houses that were built years back. And these are residential houses, similar to the buildings that they were referring to. A lot of the people in the urban areas live in houses that were built years back. And a lot of those are also unengineered, meaning that they just built it by themselves. And these are the most vulnerable ones. I feel like the government can do something. But at the meantime, while we're waiting for that, a lot of our fellow countries have done their share. There have been some subsidies given by government, other governments, to retrofit and strengthen existing houses. Similar to Colombia, there's one in Indonesia. I think the Philippines could also do that. Kung hindi pa po tayo handa na yung gobyerno yung gumawa nun, meron naman po mga private institutions who are taking it on their own to help out, right? It's a systemic. For Build Change, what we believe is systemic po kasi. First and foremost is, if these people, calling the attention of financial institutions, would be given the opportunity, right, to have access to financing, they themselves would strengthen their homes. That's what we have proven in the past. Similar to what Malin is saying, pag kinausap mo naman yung vulnerable families, they will say, yes, as long as you're giving me the access to first, the financing, and please give me access to this awareness of what's happening with me. We have a lot of technology available also. But these are just for the few, not yet for those who are really vulnerable.
Sana maibaba natin no I mean at the ground level, at the community level, lahat ng mga pinag-uusapan namin, right, ma'am? Opo, Ma'am Liz.
I just want to add para ma'am yung tanong mo paano naman yung pwede naman ang mga private sector tumulong. Parang yun yung naririnig kong malakas dito, no? So, you know, ma'am, ang private sector is always open. And we are just waiting also for the government. But I think the government can also incentivize, you know, the works of the private sector, their donations, kasi it's not just recognition. We want recognition, of course. Okay, ma'am, sa amin yan. Maganda yung ma-recognize kami. But if there will be something that the private sector can push private sector to help, no, in the retrofitting of all these houses, especially when the private sector is located in an area, in a community, they will help. No questions asked. Tutulong agad ang private sector if they are needed there. But I hope that the government or the DPWH can bring this up on incentivizing mga...
May example po ba kayo kung anong klaseng
Ma'am,
incentive?
mga,
Ano ba yan? Tax holiday? Tax grant? Tax break?
Yeah. Marami na mo. Marami nang nagsasalita.
Nag-increase na po ng interest rate ang BSP kanina. Tama ba?
Yes.
At ibig sabihin yun, yung mga utang ko sa credit card, mataas na rin, tataas na rin yung interest. So, paano, ano bang, sige ho, well, I'm an engineer, but, you know, I can probably appreciate, ano po bang magandang incentive sa private sector aside from tax holiday? Baka hindi pumayag si BSP tsaka si DPWH.
Ah, meron din ma'am yung mga sa tax holidays naman. Hindi naman one time eh. Matagal din naman yun eh. No, on a yearly basis, maybe on a 5-year term, we can innovate yung mga tax holidays. So because the private sector, lalo na yung kung nasan ka, you have a big stake. You have to protect them. And that is a good it's not just advocacy, it's a good business for us. Pag protected ang community, the commerce, the economics of things there, ma'am, sigurado tutulong ang private sector.
Napaka-open naman po ng ating gobyerno. In fact, I think, I already met some from the private sector. Yung meron, si Pangulong Bongbong po, meron sa kanya nakikipag-meet na Private Sector Advisory Council. So, isa po sa pinag-uusapan talaga nila ay yung problema ng pabahay. And of course, when we speak of housing, ma'am, doon tayo sa ating online, no? Ma'am Marilyn, sa hindi lang po kasi pabahay, alam mo, systemic talaga yung pabahay na problema. Because when you speak of pabahay, at naitayo na yan kunyari ng National Housing Authority, kailangan mo pa ng tubig, kailangan mo pa ng power, you know? Exactly. Nobody will, and the location of the resettlement should be accessible. Wala akong LG magbibigay ng land sa prime property. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tignan nyo bantayan nyo yung land use plan. Oo. Kung nasaan ang proposed resettlement nila. So, yan po yung napakahirap. Wala bang taga-gobyerno dito para tumulong sa akin?
Yeah.
Ma'am
Ma'am, if
Marlene,
I-
ano masasabi mo doon?
Yeah, that's correct, Yusek, no? Though sa Habitat Philippines, no, apart from reconstructing, we are really advocating both at the national and local governments, no? Like one of our advocacies right now is really yung improve yung local shelter planning with the local governments para nga doon pa lang, no, ma-integrate na sa CLUP yung identified
Correct.
lands for housing. But let me just go back, no, with the discussion kasi that was a very interesting question earlier, no, with regards to, di ba, sabi natin, the most vulnerable, like anticipating the big one, which had been ang dami nating mga ginawang disaster preparedness way back early 2016, no. I think two approaches yung we need to look at, no. One is for kung pwede namang on-site yung development for the informal settlers residing on a particular land, government should prioritize for in-city resettlement. That
In
avoids
situ.
in-city resettlement. That would avoid social displacement, economic displacement. By experience, no, I've been in the housing sector for 20 years. Just provide families a semblance of security of tenure, and these families will improve their housing units. Kaya naman usually blighted, light materials yung construction and very vulnerable during hazards and disasters. Kasi nga, families are also afraid to invest on doing permanent housing kasi nga, they might be demolished anytime. So government has really need to balance, no, yung development perspective niya that hindi impediments sa development ng locality when you do in city housing. Kasi usually yung default ng government natin is to allocate government lands and private lands within the city for commercial and industrial use. So kailangan yung balance ng perspective noon. Though according to Girly, no, there are also informal settlers that really needs to be relocated, especially those talaga na those residing in danger areas na wala ka na talagang magagawang mitigation, no, or engineering solution to provide them safety. So yun talaga yung kailangan nating i-relocate. But still, in the identification of resettlement sites, yung kanina, Yusek, that you mentioned, no, yung access to water, electricity, basic services, and utilities should be in the ambit, no, in the development planning. And though kanina then, with regards to the private sector participation, in all honesty, if you look at yung sa housing sector natin, heavily private sector yung led yung ano natin,
Driven.
yung housing natin. Ang laki ng participation of the private sector. In 2020, the Congress declared yung housing crisis here in the Philippines. And Congress said that we need 30 billion annually in budget appropriation annually in 20 years to address the housing backlog of 6.8 million. Even ngayon, no, pero if you look at yung annual appropriation natin sa budget, ang annual appropriation natin is very mga average of 0.73% of the annual budget. And ang layo, for example, sa 2023 budget natin, government only allocated 3.9 billion. Ang layo, that's only around 10% of the dapat na 30 billion na project ng Congress needed natin for housing. And yung 3.9 billion na budget allocation natin, even the current administration with its 1 million housing target yearly to address nga yung housing backlog natin, called for a 36 billion budget appropriation, pero that's only to subsidize interest. Hindi talaga for housing construction. So that means to say that yung subsidy lang sa interest yung 36 billion, still yung funding to build the 1 million houses is heavily reliant to the private sector and bank funding. So that's one of our advocacies really to government, no, and hopefully with other housing NGOs and also those in the development sector and the private sector to really advocate that if we really want to address poverty housing, more resiliency, lalo sa mga urban centers natin, government should really appropriate funding for housing. And usually din sa local government side natin, bihira yung LGUs na nag-appropriate ng fund for housing. Most of our LGs are heavily reliant as well sa national government. Kaya ganito, palaki ng palaki yung housing backlog natin.
I think marami po tayong challenges talaga, no? Well, government, of course, sabi niya last 5, marami pa sana tayong pag-uusapan. But actually, housing is really, it's public works were not the ones building the houses. It's really the Department of Housing, Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Okay, and of course, there's also a pending bill that would create the Department of Disaster Resilience. So, as a last word from everyone, at least our friends from the private sector, balikan ko lang yung role ng women and gender and of course correlating it with the huge problem of the country being one of the countries that is, well, we're located in the Pacific Ring of Fire. That's why we are one of the countries exposed to disaster. Okay, so again, what would be your last word and advice to women here and those that are watching us online to empower us and to motivate more women to help us, not only in the big housing problem, in making sure that our houses are retrofitted, people are not building their houses or residing in no-build zones, and government, of course, local and national government should synchronize and harmonize their plans. But balikan natin yung women because at the end of the day, everyone here is, would want to hear women in power, women in authority, women in profession, women in position. How can they, push? Ma'am G.
Thank you. For me, I think I'll address the government and corporations, private corporations to hire more women. Women are born resilient. We are embodied. We have this embodied strength in our
Nasa
in our
DNA talaga
DNA.
natin.
So imagine putting that in in the government, in legislations, in the private sector, in resilience. it's proven that we are very passionate about everything that we do, right? So I think for the government and for the private sector to have a different perspective about things on decision making, resiliency, greening your buildings, or being resilient or being adaptable on climate change, they should hire more women in the industry. Important that they do that because definitely they, like in the presentation, 1% of carbon emissions is being attributed to women, right? The greenhouse gas is being reduced by every women. Imagine if every corporation has a 1% times how many percent of greenhouse gas that they have, how many can be reduced, right? So I think that would be it.
Ma'am Girl.
For me, it's really a call for the women themselves. Tawag po sa mga kababaihan na katulad po namin. It had been proven, facts have stated that we could make a difference, right? We could really build change. Build Change per se, our organization was founded by a woman engineer, Dr. Elizabeth Hustler. 77% of our leadership are women. And we work with 99% here in the Philippines with women, with our nanays. All of us have mothers. Those mothers are resilient. It's just a matter of believing in themselves that they could do something to keep the built environment, their homes, this building safer. And that could be done by building back before the next disaster strike.
Ma'am Liz.
I think the women in position are already empowered. So all of us here actually, we are already empowered. We have the position, we have the good jobs. So we have to make a better representation of where we want to bring resiliency in our lives, in the lives and in the future that we want to create. The representation of women is very powerful. And if even we bring this to the government, it results to policy making. So we can see that when there are a big representation of women in the call for policy, nagagawa po natin yan. Nagkakaroon talaga ng resulta. And the social empowerment of women is that strong enough to really change and reshape the construction, even the construction industry. I think we're almost the engineers in the Philippines, women, based on the NEDA statistics, ma'am, 7% lang pala tayo sa Philippines. However, there are a lot of works also that can be given to women in the construction, as what the message from IFC said, in logistics, construction planning, in design, in procurement, material testing, construction management. The women can really assert, no. But however, we have to promote, capacity building, educate more the women that are lesser and weak. We can create the cooperatives for them. You call for cooperatives so that they will learn more, and also they can be part of community development, because women is a natural talker. We talk a lot, and if they don't listen, you talk more. So I think this is how I see it. So we can do a lot of things, no, in the women empowerment, but we have to be part of the educating and capacity building of the women on the lesser, those who are less knowledgeable. Financing instruments, maraming mothers, they cannot, they don't know, they have access. And even in discrimination in the filing of a housing applications. So these are things that women can do. We have to be empowered, and we have to train the trainers, the train the trainers program. We be part of that should be part of our CSR. So all the empowered women here, ma'am, the women in positions, there's a lot of things to do for us.
Well said, ma'am. At hindi lang po tayo talker. While we talk, we do.
Yes.
'Di ba? Yung kamay natin
Multitasking.
hindi yata tumitigil na kakaayos sa bahay, kahit nagsasalita ka,
Correct.
'di ba? You
Yes.
just, oo, may ginagawa,
Yes,
multitasking
ginagawa.
talaga
Sabay
eh. 'Di ba?
multitasking.
Multitasking. Tsaka very, ano tayo eh, very into detail,
Results,
no?
details,
Oo, into
details.
detail. Ma'am
Okay.
Marilyn, gender and, resiliency,
Yeah.
and
I
your advice to
Yeah,
women.
I agree to actually it's been said no by our three co-panelists here. Pero siguro I just wanted to emphasize no sa housing sector for example, women has already uh, exhibited no that strength no in advocating for housing rights. The laws that we enjoy currently, no, yung enactment ng Urban Development and Housing Act noong 1992, the allocation of budget, for example, way back nung panahon ni President Noynoy Aquino, no, beyond yung in the midst no of those advocacy work, majority talaga who are pushing are women. So that manifests no yung power of women really sa advocacy na very strong. Though sometimes no, currently no ang challenge lang talaga is pagdating na sa pag-handle ng positions no madalas yung women na yung nali-leave out doon sa decision making representations no and yun yung kailangan talaga parating advocate na more women really holds yung ano no yung representation management positions though in Habitat Philippines hindi namin masyado problema no yung power of women kasi in 2020 100% of the senior management are women and even currently no 60% of senior management are women. So yeah, so sa akin lang is very simple siguro yung perspectives ko as to why women become more ano no sabi nyo nga resilient no pagdating sa advocacy work and really spousing for development no. Siguro kasi nga we can easily relate. Like for example, ako when I review our housing settlements program, I look at it sa lens no bilang social worker, bilang babae, bilang parent na whenever we develop our housing programs, kung ikaw na yung titira sa settlement na to, sa housing project na to, what will be the kind of life no that you and your family, especially your children, will be experiencing na hopefully they will be living in a dignified talaga na environment. So that's
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Very true, very true. So, kami po, no, na nandito sa harap ninyo ay sumusuporta sa advocacy ng resiliency, ng preparedness, building back better, building back correctly the first time. Of course, making sure that everyone, the objective of the Philippine Development Plan mentions, of course, one chapter on housing as one of the primary concern and objective to make sure that every Filipino has the desired life, by 2040 ambition natin. Oh, with that, my last word is that, women, let's all support each other, let's empower each other, and men, women, we work together at the end of the day. And last word, let's be kind to everyone. Okay? So sa ngalan po ng aking mga kasamahan, Ma'am Liza, Ma'am Marilyn, Ma'am G, Ma'am, Girly, kami po ay nagpapasalamat sa inyong pakikinig at hindi po dito natatapos ang ating usapan dahil marami po pa po tayong paghahandaan kami sa gobyerno where you have a huge task and we hope that we can continue expecting and having your support from the private sector in whatever way we are allowed and we can collaborate and coordinate and collaborate and help each other. Salamat po, IFC, sa forum na to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. While Miss Marilyn still on screen, can we have a group photo? Can we have it on this side so Miss Marilyn can join the group photo? Well, that was a very much productive and heated conversation, but one that we really need during these times. We saw the gaps and also the opportunities, especially how the public and private sector can work together in the entire resilient built environment, and how the women as change makers can make a difference in this sector. Again, thank you, Ms. Liza Solerio, Ms. G. Garcia, Ms. Marilyn B. Estrellado, Ms. Gerly Lopez, and Yusecati Cabral for indulging us with those powerful and enlightening thoughts on women's vital contributions and role in transforming the built environment of the Philippines toward resilience. And earlier, I know that we promised that we will entertain questions after the panel discussion, but mindful of our time, we will take those questions, we will take note of them, and we will send them via email. We will make sure that we get our panelists' answers for those. At this point, I can't blame you if you might be a little overwhelmed from the exchange of information from the panel discussion that we had, although that's a good problem, right? But with this wealth of knowledge, it will be very much helpful that we're able to gather and process these thoughts. Don't worry about that, because Doc Tata Medado got your back. Maria Teresita Pastor Medado, or Doc Tata Pastor Medado, is president of Asia Pacific College, or APC, since 2017, an educational partnership of SM Foundation and IBM Philippines. Dr. Medado is board member and treasurer of Arise Philippines and convener for the Philippine Women's International Network for Disaster Risk Reduction, or WINDRR. Concurrently, she is a member of the Technical Working Group on High Impact Programs on Talent Development and head of Sub-Technical Working Group on Industry Academic Linkage of IT Business Process Association of the Philippines, or IBPAT. Doc Tata Medado holds a doctorate in educational leadership and management from the De La Salle University, Manila, Philippines. Doc Tata, the floor is now yours to do the panel discussion synthesis.
Good afternoon, or shall we say good evening now? This is really I will call a great ride for me, because as an educator, I am the one who's being educated. And admittedly, there is so much power that I feel in this room. Forgive me for saying that it is women power that I feel, because there are men inside the room, but I believe we are only what we are as women also because of you, men. So let me start by having to recall everything that what's important during this session. It may not be in the sequence that it has been related to you, but I would like to stress certain points that which is my own educational take on what this is about. As an educator, I think that there is always a means for us to collaborate, because I live in collaboration from students, parents, industry partners, and all that. And I believe this is a perfect setting that allows us to be here in 2 hours to simply belt out everything that we want to know about women and the power of women in disaster resiliency. I'm especially amazed at the discussion when we started talking about, I think this was Fran, when she said that there is no way we cannot be involved, because it is 50% of our women, all right, who die, all right, in situations like this. And at the same time, that mortality rate will grow.
Okay? Because we have not done anything about it. I think this is the message that we want to say. If we do not act now, that 50% is going to get higher. And I believe it or not, uh, there is there's some light that we see in the tunnel when also we were informed that if more gender diverse leadership will occur or will be managed, look at this figure. We will perform significantly better 8/9 climate action indicators. All right. If there is gender diverse leadership, 2 times more likely to develop decarbonization strategies. If all of us are involved, if women also are involved, more likely, 25% more likely to have medium or long term GHG reduction targets. And that's just, tip of the iceberg. Right now, when I heard all of these women speak, I think there is no other way. We are the ones affected. We are the ones dying. All right. It behooves us to say that this is something that we should do something about. We're not going to wait for the men. Sorry. But yeah, it is us. It is us. They're the mothers. They're the children that the mothers look after. Remember, and I jotted this down as a summary. I have so many summaries, okay. But it was taken up in the discussion. Women has a penchant for detail. Somebody said that. Raise your hand. There you go. Okay. Penchant detail. Sometimes overly obsessive. Overly pa obsessive na. Okay. Who said that? I think Lisa did say that. Okay. And Lisa did also say that when we talk and we are not heard, we keep talking. Obsession, compulsive. Okay. Are you sure? Okay. But it is true. It is true that that is a solution. That's a solution that will take us to nirvana. Okay. That really is because that's innate to us. Something more innate. We are homemakers. We understand what it is to lose a home. We understand what it is to lose a child because we were not prepared. We understand how it is that we can communicate to our neighbors and say to ourselves that, hi, oh my God, I need help. We're the ones offering help, and we are the ones saying as well that public private sector should be together in this. How long have we said that? Ang tagal na, diba? We've always said, and has it happened? And today I am witness to that happening. Well, thanks to I will call her the lady in red because I like saying that. And because she was open, she was so open to discussing the possibilities of really putting together a lot of interventions that had been mentioned here during this forum. And some of them really are quite interesting in a way that the leadership of women, for instance, I can see that. Okay, look at my notes. Okay, I can see that the role of women. G Garcia, where's G? Hi G. Hi G. Your advice, all right, is that to hire more women, okay, and to get these women who are passionate, okay, as G says, to really work on the details. They're good at it. We should have that role. There should be more women. And that is a resolution I think we should take today. That action of women will speak louder than words. Alright. I've also taken note on Girly. Girly was not Girly, right? Sorry. Hi, Girly. Yes. And Girly was saying that, um, the mother of resilience. Okay, the mother of resilience is the built environment. We have to work on that. Women knows that. Why? We have a specific quality in women that I jotted down because we are a homemaker. All right. We know exactly what to do better than our husbands, better than our partners, because it is us who will drive, actually, who will drive the resiliency for a built environment. We know what it is. Our penchant for detail, if you want to connect the first one that I said, okay, and plus the fact that we can help in resiliency for the built environment, is really acting on what we are already doing. It is innate, it is natural. We know the details. We can predict, even without analytics, we can predict what's going to happen next. And that is virtue. That is the virtue of women. Lastly, I think Lisa was talking about call on us and we'll be there. Hey, government, just give us a ring and we'll be there. We will partner with you. It has happened. So many instances where government was ill prepared. Okay. A little bit of politics here. Okay. But then again, what really saved was the private sector. And what really saved are institutions like Habitat. Okay. Institutions like, um, uh, well, SM, for instance, that is run basically by mostly women, okay? And it saved people. So at the end of the day, there's one more virtue that I wish to that you have given me as the information I'm looking at right now, which is really a plan. We know how to plan. Okay, we know what it is that on an everyday schedule, we know what it is to feed our children for the day. We've marketed all over for that entire week. And this is exactly what we do best. And therefore, I liken that to what Marilyn said. Marlene, right? Where's she? Yeah. Okay. And she did said that the informer settlers, all right, need education from women like us. They will believe us because we know what to do. And the informer settlers, we can start one by one by educating them, by making them face the fact that they can be powerful as well. And so, ladies and gentlemen, there's just too much information that I cannot digest at the moment. But I think the call is very clear. The call is very clear. 50% of the women will die. It is our responsibility not to make that happen. And the only people, the only set or the only group that can make it happen and who understand the dying women is really us. The call is here today. And I'd like to mention again that this powerful congregation right now, I am giving you the responsibility to act fast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doc Tata, for that profound synthesis. But I would like to call you again here on our platform, together with our panelists and moderator, for the awarding of the tokens of appreciation to be facilitated by Tui Bui, the Senior Country Officer of IFC. Once again, may I call on our panelists and moderator in front for the awarding of the tokens.
I'm on the block because
But that's where we live.
please do get me.
Yes, I will.
We need to video. We need I need more.
Yeah. Yes, for the panelists and Doc Tata is still here. May we call on you here in front for the distribution of the tokens of appreciation. Here with Ms. Tui Bui, the Senior Country Officer of IFC.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, to conclude our Women's Month Forum, IFC Senior Country Officer, Ms. Tui Bui, will deliver her closing remarks. Ms. Tui Bui is a Senior Country Officer for the Philippines. She has more than 25 years of experience in banking and corporate finance. For 10 years with IFC, she has been working
for ourselves, but also for our younger generation, our son, grandson, our grandkids, our kids, and our grandkids. So I would like, on behalf of the IFC and the your member World Bank Group, I would like to thank you for participating in the discussion today. But also, I would like to call on just to shout out, and big thank you to all the women, and especially that the women leaders who support the building resilient commitment and campaign in the Philippines. I would like to call on a few names here that also here today and as our partner, Mrs. Gia Garcia from NEO, Miss Lisa Silerio from SM. I think not here today is Miss Tina Santos, Miss Carmen Jimenez Ong of Menanco, and especially Emma Imperial, that she's very, she's taking a strong lead in promoting the green buildings and resilient and building resilient. And thank you so much, Dr. Tata Medado, for your support of the program, and also, just it's really your conclusion that we have to take action, and women, which is not only talk, but we walk the talk as well. So thank you so much for the participant today, and we will continue our dialogue and continue our support to facilitate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tui. Very well said, and what a great way to close this afternoon's event. And that wraps up our Women's Month event, the Building Resilience Index Forum. But before we officially end the forum, please be reminded to fill up the survey forms for our on-site participants, and the QR code will be flashed on the screens for our friends over Zoom. This will help us in assessing and improving the delivery of future BRI activities. On behalf of the collaborating organizations for this initiative, the International Finance Corporation, Government of the Netherlands, Australian Government, Arise Philippines, Resilient.PH, SM Cares, and WinDRR, I would like to extend a heartfelt gratitude to all our speakers and attendees, both virtually and on-site. Your support means a lot. Together, let's all work toward advancing women's role in creating a resilient built environment. Thank you, everyone, and a lovely evening to all. Abante babae, happy National Women's Month. May we invite the participants on site for a group photo? Mm. Yeah. Again, I would like to invite the on-site participants in front for a group photo.
Collect na lang.